Lake Havasu has sat at almost exactly the same level for nearly 90 years. While Lake Mead fell to the lowest point in its history and Lake Powell set records of its own, Havasu barely moved. It looks like the one lake on the Colorado that is fine. It is not. Havasu cannot keep its own water. Every drop it holds is released to it by Hoover and Davis dams upstream, and those releases are shrinking. This 45-mile lake is the single place where the river is pumped out for 27 million people, and it is running on borrowed time. Here is the detail that tells the real story. Lake Havasu was never built to store water. It was built to hand it off. Almost everyone who follows the Colorado River knows two names: Lake Mead, behind Hoover Dam, Lake Powell, behind Glen Canyon Dam. Those are the lakes on the news, the ones with the pale ring climbing the canyon walls. Havasu sits 155 miles downstream of Hoover Dam, on the border between Arizona and California, and it almost never makes the broadcast. The water there is flat and blue and full. People water ski on it. A rebuilt London Bridge crosses one arm of it. That calm surface is the most dangerous thing about it. Two of the three biggest places where water is pulled out of the whole lower Colorado River sit at the southern end of this one lake. Put simply, Havasu is the exit. It is the exact point where the Colorado stops being a river and becomes drinking water for Phoenix, Tucson, Los Angeles, and San Diego. So the question is not whether Havasu looks full tonight. It does. The question is, who is depending on it, and what is keeping it full? Parker, Arizona. The dam that makes the lake was finished in 1938, and it is one of the strangest dams in the world. Parker Dam is the deepest dam ever built. Of its 320 feet of height, 73% sits below the original bed of the river. Engineers dug 235 feet down through the riverbed before they hit solid rock strong enough to build the base on. Only about 85 feet of the dam is visible above the water. The rest is buried. Behind it, Lake Havasu filled for the first time on October 16, 1938. The water it can hold is 619,400 acre-feet. Hold on to that number, because it is the whole point. Lake Mead, upstream, can hold more than 26 million acre-feet. Havasu holds less than 1/40th of that. It is not a storage lake the way Mead is a storage lake. It is a wide, deep, 45-mile stretch of held-back river, and it was put there to do one job. That job is to be a pass-through pool. The water comes down from Hoover Dam, passes through Davis Dam and Lake Mojave, and arrives at Havasu. At the south end, giant pumps lift it out of the lake and send it across two states. Whatever the pumps do not take continues through Parker Dam and keeps going down the river toward Mexico. Now look at those pumps, because they are the reason 27 million people should know this lake by name. On the California shore, about 2 miles above Parker Dam, sits the Whitsett Intake Pumping Plant. It belongs to the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. The Whitsett plant lifts water 291 feet straight up out of Lake Havasu and pours it into the Colorado River Aqueduct, a concrete river that runs 242 miles west to Lake Matthews near Riverside. That aqueduct can move close to 1 billion gallons of water a day. The Metropolitan Water District serves 19 million people across 26 cities and water agencies, including Los Angeles, San Diego, and most of the suburbs in between. A short distance away sits a second plant, the Mark Wilmer Pumping Plant. That one feeds the Central Arizona Project, a 336-mile canal that climbs and crosses the desert all the way to Tucson. The Central Arizona Project supplies water to roughly 80% of the people in Arizona, including Phoenix and Tucson. From Lake Havasu to the far end of the system, the water is lifted nearly 2,900 feet uphill by a chain of pumping plants. Almost nobody has heard either name: Whitsett, Mark Wilmer, two pumping stations on the shore of a fun and boating lake, quietly doing the most important job in the American Southwest. Watch how Havasu turned from a quiet pass-through pool into a choke point, one date at a time. The Colorado River Aqueduct delivered its first water from the lake to the California coast on June 17, 1941. For decades after that, the lake had one major customer. Then Arizona finally got its turn. The Central Arizona Project began pumping water out of Havasu in 1985, and the full 336-mile canal to Tucson was completed in 1993. From that point on, one lake was feeding two of the biggest water systems in the country at the same time. For most of the 20th century, that was fine. The river gave plenty, the lakes upstream were high, and the pumps always had water under them. Then the climate did something the 1922 planners never planned for. Around the year 2000, the Colorado River entered a drought that has now run more than 25 years, the driest stretch the region has seen in over a century. The two big lakes upstream started a long, slow fall. In 2020, the water in Lake Mead dropped low enough to set off the first official delivery cut in the river's history, aimed at Arizona and Nevada. In 2022, Mead fell to its lowest level since it first filled in the 1930s, and the lower basin was operating under a Tier 1 shortage. In 2023, conditions got bad enough to push the lower basin into a deeper Tier 2 cut. The river has stayed in shortage every year since. Add it up. The Colorado River Aqueduct pulls more than 1 million acre-feet a year out of Havasu. The Central Arizona project is built to pull about 1.5 million acre-feet a year out of the same lake. 2 pipes, 1 small lake, 4 big city areas, and tens of billions of dollars of farms and cities standing downstream of all that pulling. This is the part that explains everything. None of that water belongs to Havasu. The lake does not make it. The lake cannot save it. Havasu is kept inside a range of about 10 feet, generally between 445 and 450 feet, on purpose, by the Bureau of Reclamation. They keep it nearly full, so the pumps always have water to grab. The fullness is not a sign of health. It is a setting. A number an operator holds in place by letting out exactly enough water from the dams upstream. The Bureau of Reclamation describes Parker Dam's job as controlling and evening out the water let go from Hoover and Davis, and smoothing out the flow of the Colorado. Picture the last small tray of water at the bottom of a long hose. The tray stays full and steady as long as the hose keeps running. It looks calm no matter what is happening at the source. But a tray makes no water of its own. The moment the hose upstream slows, the tray cannot pour out what is no longer arriving. Havasu is that tray, and right now, the hose is being turned down. Now, pull back from the lake and look at the whole line of the lower river. The water leaves Lake Powell in the north, runs down through the Grand Canyon, and collects in Lake Mead behind Hoover Dam. From there, it drops to Lake Mojave behind Davis Dam. From Mojave, it drops again to Lake Havasu behind Parker Dam. 3 lakes in a row, each one lower than the last, each one handing water down to the next. Mead and Mojave are big. Havasu, at the bottom of that chain, is small and shallow next to them, and it is the one with the pumps that send water away bolted to its shore. Everything that happens to the lakes above it arrives at Havasu last. There is a hard, physical limit hiding in that setup. The pumps at the south end of the lake are built to pull from a certain range of water levels. By contract, Havasu is usually held between 445 and 450 feet, so the intake pipes always sit safely underwater. The lake is not allowed to swing the way Mead does, because the pumps need it steady. That steadiness is exactly what makes it weak. Mead can lose 150 feet of height and still work as a lake. Havasu has almost no room to fall before the pumps that empty it start to struggle. A lake that cannot drop is a lake with no room to spare. Look at what is happening above the lake in 2026. The Bureau of Reclamation has called this the driest year on record for the Colorado River. The snowpack that feeds the whole region peaked on March 9, 2026, at 8.9 inches of water, about 60% of the usual amount. The low end of the forecast for water flowing into Lake Powell came in near 2.78 million acre-feet, roughly 29% of the normal average, and one of the lowest numbers ever predicted. As of the spring of 2026, Lake Powell sat about 24% full. Lake Mead sat about 32% full and is in what the rules call a Tier 1 shortage. Powell dropped so close to a danger line that the Bureau cut the planned release from the dam down to 6 million acre-feet, the lowest amount in decades, and started pulling emergency water out of the Flaming Gorge Lake hundreds of miles upstream just to keep Powell working. That last point is the one to hold on to. When the Bureau cuts the release from Lake Powell to protect Lake Powell, every lake below it gets less. Less for Mead, less for Mojave, and less, eventually, for the tray at the bottom of the hose. The cut has a second edge. The Bureau warned that the lower releases from Powell would pull Lake Mead down by about another 20 feet, and that this could cut the electric power coming out of Hoover Dam by as much as 40%. Less water moving through the system means less water and less power at every dam below it, all the way down to Parker. Kyle Roerink, the executive director of the Great Basin Water Network, has said on the record that the federal government is leaning on old, short-term fixes to solve a permanent problem, the same emergency moves it reached for in 2022 and 2023. Pull water from one lake to prop up another, then hope the next winter is wet. It buys time. It does not make more water. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. We break down one Western water system every week. The dams, the numbers, and the people downstream, so you can actually follow what is happening to the river before it shows up in your bill. By 2026, the set of laws that decides who loses water first is also running out of road. Two deals run the river today: the 2007 Interim Guidelines and the 2019 Drought Contingency Plan. Both run out at the end of 2026. The 7 states that share the river, Arizona, California, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, were given a deadline of February 14, 2026, to agree on what comes next. They missed it, so the federal government drew up its own backup plans. Every single one of the Bureau's backup plans puts Arizona at the front of the cut line, with cuts ranging from roughly 15 to 35% of the Central Arizona Project's supply. There is a reason for that, and it runs straight back to Lake Havasu. The Central Arizona Project holds the weakest legal right to the river's water. That was the price Arizona paid in 1968 to get the project approved at all. In plain terms, when the river runs short, the canal that starts at Lake Havasu and feeds Phoenix and Tucson is the first major supply that gets turned down. Not the last, the first. Pay attention to this next part, because it is where these far-off numbers become a faucet. Under the current rules, a Tier 1 shortage already cuts Arizona's river supply by 512,000 acre-feet a year. A Tier 2 shortage cuts 592,000. A Tier 3 cuts 720,000. Those cuts land first on farms, then reach towards cities. And the supply they are cutting is the exact water that gets pumped out of Havasu. Brenda Berman is the general manager of the Central Arizona Project, the agency that runs that 336-mile canal out of the lake. Speaking on the record about the cuts coming, she said the lower basin states, Mexico, and the project's own users would all be taking big cuts to protect the river in 2026. Her words were direct. "It is not easy," she said, "but we must remain committed to protecting the river." That is the person in charge of the Havasu pumps telling you the math is tight. Now follow the water out of the lake and watch where the pressure lands, in order. First, the river itself. Havasu's narrow range only works while the dams upstream can keep feeding it. Take that away, and the lake that has sat flat for 90 years stops being a sure thing. Second, the tourism economy on the shore. Lake Havasu City was carved out of raw desert starting in 1963, when a businessman named Robert McCulloch bought 16,000 acres and started laying out streets. He bought the old London Bridge from England, had it taken apart block by block, shipped it across the world, and rebuilt it on the lake. It opened in 1971 and cost $5.1 million. Today, the city is home to tens of thousands of people whose whole economy counts on the lake staying full. Third, the farms. The Central Arizona Project was sold to Arizona as the thing that would finally let the desert bloom. Its weak claim means the farm water districts it serves are the ones that get cut first and cut deepest. Some have already had their deliveries slashed. Fourth, the cities of Central Arizona. Phoenix and Tucson lean on Central Arizona Project water for a large share of their supply. They have stored some away underground for dry years, a backup built in wetter times. That backup is real. It is also not unlimited, and it cannot take a forever cut of 20 or 30% year after year. Fifth, Southern California. The Metropolitan Water District's aqueduct out of Havasu is a main supply for 19 million people. Los Angeles, San Diego, and the inland suburbs all drink, in part, from water that started its journey at the Whitsett pumps on that lake almost nobody thinks about. 5 layers of fallout, all hanging on one pass-through pool that holds less than a 40th of what Lake Mead holds, kept full by releases the Bureau is now cutting on purpose. None of this fighting is new. The fight over who controls the water at this exact spot is older than the dam. Go back to November 10th, 1934. Building had just begun on Parker Dam. the structure that would make Lake Havasu and send water to California. Arizona was furious. The state believed California was about to take Colorado River water that belonged to Arizona under the 1922 Colorado River Compact, and that the dam was being built without the right approval. So, the governor of Arizona, Benjamin Moore, declared martial law and sent about 100 National Guard troops from the 158th Infantry Regiment to the riverbank to stop the work by force. To get his soldiers out onto the water, the governor took over 2 ferry boats run by a steamboat captain and state lawmaker named Nellie T. Bush. Newspapers mocked the little fleet as the Arizona Navy and named Bush its admiral. On its first mission, the Navy got tangled in the dam's cables and had to be rescued by the California workers it was sent to scare off. No shots were fired, but the stunt worked for a while. The Secretary of the Interior paused the building until the courts and Congress could sort it out. The dam was only finished after the federal government forced Arizona to back down in 1935. Arizona did not even sign the deal until 1944. This next fact should stop you. That 1922 deal, the document everyone was willing to send troops over, divided up the river based on how much water the river carried during some of its wettest years on record. The states split roughly 16.5 million acre-feet a year between them. The river, in a normal, modern year, carries far less than that, and in 2026 it is carrying a fraction. The whole system was built on a promise of water that does not exist. 90 years later, the troops and the gunboats are gone. The argument is exactly the same. 7 states, stuck, fighting over who gets the water and how much. Except now, the river is smaller, the cities are far bigger, and the deadline is real. So sit with the questions hanging over this lake tonight. If the Bureau keeps cutting releases from Lake Powell to save Lake Powell, how long can Havasu's flat blue surface stay flat? What happens to the Whitsett and Mark Wilmer pumps if the lake can no longer be held at 445 feet? Which of the 5 layers downstream breaks first? The farms, the cities, or the deal itself? And if 7 states could not agree before the deadline they set for themselves, who decides, and how fast, when the water actually runs short? Nobody can answer those yet. The data does not say. What the data does say is that the lake everyone forgot is the one place where the whole river narrows to 2 pipes. So picture it the way it looks right now. Out on Lake Havasu, the water is calm and high, and the color of a postcard. Boats are crossing under the London Bridge. And 2 miles above Parker Dam, the Whitsett pumps are still running in the dark, lifting the Colorado River 291 feet up and out of a lake that looks exactly as full as it did yesterday, fed by a river that has less to give every single year.